Hey guys, welcome back to the Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people's story. I never thought I'd have to deal with an HOA living on my 80-acre farm that's been in the family since 1932. The land sits about 20 minutes outside of town, and until recently, our only neighbors were other farmers and ranchers who understood and respected property boundaries. That all changed when a developer bought Old Man Johnson's failed dairy farm next door and turned it into one of those cookie-cutter suburban neighborhoods complete with an overzealous HOA. At first, I tried to be neighborly. When their board president came over to welcome me to the area, despite my family farming here for nearly a century, I politely explained that while I hoped we could all get along, my farm wasn't part of their development or HOA. He seemed to understand, and for the first few months, things were fine. The problem started when their residents discovered my private farm road. See, my property has this long gravel road that connects to the main highway. It cuts about 10 minutes off the drive into town compared to going through their neighborhood's winding streets. I started noticing more and more cars using my road as a shortcut. I put up private road no trespassing signs, but they were ignored. Then I installed a security camera that caught dozens of their residents treating my farm road like their personal expressway. Some were even speeding and kicking up dust that disturbed my cattle. I decided to address this at their next HOA meeting. Big mistake. "Thank you for coming tonight," the board president said with fake politeness when I raised my concerns. "But honestly, that road is a community asset. It's selfish of you to try to restrict access." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "It's my private road on my private property," I explained. "I maintain it at my own expense. Your residents have no right to use it." "Well," he replied with a smirk, "perhaps we should take a vote on making it an official community access road." "You can't vote on what to do with my property," I said. "I'm not even in your HOA." That's when their new board member, a woman who'd recently moved from California, chimed in. "Actually, we can. Anything that impacts our community's property values falls under HOA jurisdiction." I left that meeting knowing this was going to get ugly. The next day, I installed a heavy-duty gate across my road with keycard access only for my family and the workers who helped with the harvest. It was expensive, but I figured it would solve the problem. It did, for about a week. Then I came home one evening to find the gate had been rammed off its hinges, clearly hit by a vehicle. The security camera had been spray-painted black. This was no accident. It was vandalism. I called the sheriff's department to file a report. While the deputy was taking pictures of the damage, 3 cars from the development drove right past us on my road, waving as they went by. The deputy's jaw dropped. "Want me to stop them?" he asked. I nodded, and he flipped on his lights. When he pulled them over, wouldn't you know it, one of the drivers was the HOA president himself. "We have every right to use this road," he told the deputy. "It's a community access way." The deputy wasn't impressed. "Sir, this is a private road on private property. Unless you have written permission from the owner, you're trespassing." "We'll see about that," the president muttered as he drove off. The next morning, I discovered what he meant by that. The HOA had installed spike strips at both ends of my road overnight, the kind that shred your tires if you drive over them the wrong way. They'd positioned them so their residents could still use my road to get to town, but I couldn't access my own property from either direction without destroying my tires. Now they'd crossed a line from annoying to dangerous. What if I had an emergency and needed to get farm equipment in or out? What if my wife needed to get to the hospital? I took photos and videos of everything, then called my lawyer. "This is beyond HOA overreach," my lawyer said when I showed him the evidence. "This is criminal. They've essentially laid traps on your property without consent. We're going to nail them to the wall." He helped me file for an emergency injunction to have the spike strips removed immediately. We also filed a civil suit against the HOA for trespassing, vandalism of my gate, unauthorized modification of my private road, creating hazardous conditions, emotional distress, legal fees. The cherry on top? My lawyer discovered that installing tire spikes on a private road without proper permits and warning signs was a violation of state transportation codes. He reported them to the Department of Transportation, which launched their own investigation. The HOA's lawyer called the very next day, practically begging to settle, but I wasn't interested in a quick payout. I wanted to make sure they never pulled something like this again. "No deal," I told my lawyer. "Let's take them to court." The day of the hearing, half the neighborhood showed up to support their HOA. They'd apparently been fed some story about me being an unreasonable old farmer refusing to share my road with the community. Their smug expressions didn't last long. My lawyer methodically presented our evidence. Property deeds showing my ownership. Surveys proving the road was entirely on my land. Photos of the vandalized gate. Security footage of HOA residents trespassing. Pictures of the illegal spike strips. documentation of all the money I'd spent maintaining the road, expert testimony about the safety hazards they'd created. The HOA's defense basically amounted to, "But we want to use his road." They couldn't produce a single document showing they had any right to access my property. Their lawyer looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. The judge was not amused. His ruling was better than I could have hoped for. The HOA had to immediately remove the spike strips. They were ordered to pay for a new security gate. They had to reimburse me for all road maintenance costs from the past year. They were required to pay my legal fees. Each board member was personally fined $5,000 for the illegal road modifications. The HOA had to send a written notice to all residents that using my road was trespassing. If any residents were caught on my road again, they'd face additional fines. But here's the best part. The Department of Transportation investigation revealed that the HOA board had used association funds to purchase the illegal spike strips. This violated their own bylaws about proper use of HOA money. When this came to light, the residents who'd been supporting them turned on them fast. Within days of the court ruling, an emergency HOA meeting was called. I didn't attend, but my security cameras caught dozens of angry residents storming into their clubhouse that evening. The shouting was so loud I could hear it from my property. The next morning, one of the more reasonable residents, an older guy who'd always waved when he drove past, back when the road drama started, came by to tell me what happened. "You wouldn't believe the chaos," he said, shaking his head. "Turns out the board spent over $50,000 of HOA funds on this whole mess. The spike strips, legal fees, everything. They didn't get approval for any of it. People are furious." "I bet they are," I replied. "That's a lot of money to waste on harassing a farmer." He nodded. "The whole board was voted out last night. The president tried to defend himself, saying it was all for property values, but nobody was buying it. Someone dug into the books and found out they'd been mismanaging funds for months." This kicked off a full forensic audit of the HOA's finances. Turned out the spike strips were just the tip of the iceberg. The board had been using HOA funds like their personal piggy bank. Expensive dinners, golf memberships, even a business retreat to Las Vegas that had nothing to do with HOA business. The new board president, a retired judge who'd recently moved to the development, came to see me personally. "I want to apologize for everything that's happened," she said. "This is not how our community should behave. We're implementing new policies to make sure nothing like this ever happens again." I appreciated the gesture, but I wasn't about to let my guard down. The new security gate I had installed, courtesy of the HOA's court-ordered payment, was top of the line, with cameras that captured license plates and sent alerts to my phone. I also put up large signs warning that trespassers would be prosecuted. But the real karma came about a month later. Remember those board members who got personally fined $5,000 each? Well, they thought they could just pay it from HOA funds too. When that got shut down, they had to scramble to pay out of pocket. The former president ended up having to sell his precious collector car to cover it. The Department of Transportation investigation also led to criminal charges for the spike strips. Turns out installing tire shredding devices on any road, private or public, without proper permits and safety measures is a serious offense. The former board members each got hit with misdemeanor charges and more fines. Their reputations in the community were completely destroyed. The former president tried to claim he was being persecuted, but nobody was sympathetic. One by one, they all put their houses up for sale and moved away. These days, things are pretty quiet. The new gate works perfectly, and I haven't had a single trespasser. Some of the residents even buy fresh eggs and produce from my farm stand now. Amazing how treating your neighbors with respect works better than trying to bully them. The former board members? Last I heard, the president was trying to join another HOA board in the next county over. Good luck with that. Their legal troubles made the local news, so everyone knows what they did. My wife thinks it's funny how it all played out. "All they had to do was leave us alone," she said one evening as we sat on our porch, watching the sunset over our peaceful farm. "Instead, they spent a fortune and ruined their own lives trying to steal a gravel road." She's right. Sometimes the best revenge is just letting entitled people face the consequences of their own actions. Though I have to admit, watching them remove those spike strips under the supervision of sheriff's deputies was pretty satisfying. I did make one change after all this. I installed a nice bench by my gate with a clear view of the security camera. Sometimes when I'm having my morning coffee, I'll sit there and wave at the commuters stuck in traffic on their own fancy development roads. Petty? Maybe. But after what they put me through, I figure I've earned it. The whole experience taught me a valuable lesson about standing your ground when you're in the right. Those HOA folks thought they could bully a simple farmer into giving up his property rights. Instead, they learned that being right matters more than being entitled. Update. 6 months later. The criminal cases are done, and you won't believe what the former HOA board members did next. I've gotten quite a few messages asking for an update on the whole spike strip situation, so here's what's happened in the 6 months since my original post. First, the criminal cases against the former HOA board members finally wrapped up last week. You might remember they were charged with illegally installing tire shredding devices and misuse of HOA funds. Well, it turns out the prosecutor wasn't playing around. The former president tried to claim he didn't know the spike strips were illegal, but that defense fell apart when my lawyer produced emails showing he'd actually researched tire shredders and specifically chose ones that couldn't be driven over in reverse. The prosecutor argued this showed clear intent to create a hazard on my property. The judge wasn't impressed by their excuses. Here's how it played out for each of them. The former president got 30 days in county jail served on weekends, 2 years probation, and 200 hours of community service. The irony? His community service involves maintaining public roads. I heard he has to pick up trash along the highway every Saturday wearing a bright orange vest. The vice president and treasurer both got 18 months probation and 100 hours of community service. They also had to pay additional restitution to the HOA for the misused funds. But here's where it gets really interesting. During the criminal investigation, they found evidence that the former board had been running this kind of scheme in other neighborhoods. Turns out, before moving here, they'd been on HOA boards in 3 other communities, each time getting voted out after suspicious financial dealings. One of my neighbors did some digging online and found news articles about them pulling similar stunts, trying to force non-HOA properties to join their associations, misusing funds, and harassing residents. They'd just moved to a new development when things got too hot, then start all over again. The prosecutor called them a roving band of HOA bandits in court. She said they'd move into nice neighborhoods, get elected to the board, then use HOA funds for their own benefit while bullying residents. When they got caught, they'd just sell their houses and find a new target. That explained why they went after my farm road so aggressively. They weren't just being entitled. They were trying to bully me into either joining their HOA or selling my land to their developer friends. They'd done it before successfully with other holdout properties. The investigation uncovered a whole network of corrupt HOA board members who'd work together to take over associations. They'd help each other get elected, then abuse their positions for profit. The FBI is actually investigating some of their previous HOA boards now for wire fraud and racketeering. Remember how I mentioned the former president tried to join another HOA board in the next county? Well, that fell through spectacularly. The residents there Googled his name, found news coverage of our spike strip case, and basically ran him out of town before he could even buy a house. His wife ended up divorcing him after all this came out. Apparently, she had no idea what he'd been up to and was horrified to learn about the criminal charges. She actually came by my farm stand to apologize in person last week. "I'm so sorry for everything he put you through," she said. "I knew he was obsessed with HOA rules, but I never thought he'd do something so dangerous and stupid." The new HOA board has been amazing through all this. They've totally transformed how things are run. They implemented strict financial controls requiring multiple approvals for any spending. All board meetings are now recorded and live-streamed for transparency. They hired an independent auditor to review the books quarterly. Any legal action has to be approved by a majority of residents, not just the board. They even added term limits to prevent anyone from holding too much power. The retired judge who serves as the new president invited me to speak at their annual meeting about property rights and being a good neighbor. I shared stories about growing up on the farm and how the old-timers used to help each other out instead of fighting over rules and regulations. "You know what makes property values really go up?" I told them. "Having a community where people respect each other and work together. No amount of rules can replace basic human decency." The speech must have hit home because they voted to create a community relations committee focused on building bridges between the development and surrounding properties. They even started a monthly farmers market in their clubhouse parking lot where local farmers can sell produce. I've actually made some good friends among the residents now that all the drama is over. Several families bring their kids to learn about farming, and I've been teaching some of them how to grow vegetables in their own backyards. The HOA even changed their rules to allow raised garden beds in front yards. The former board members all ended up selling their houses at a loss and moving away. But karma wasn't done with them yet. Remember those FBI investigations into their previous HOA schemes? Well, 3 weeks ago, federal agents arrested the former president and treasurer. Turns out they'd been running a complex fraud scheme through multiple HOAs for years. They'd inflate contracts for services like landscaping and maintenance, then get kickbacks from the companies they hired. They're facing serious federal charges now. The former vice president turned state's evidence and is cooperating with prosecutors. He provided documents showing how they'd systematically target properties like mine, trying to force owners to sell to their developer friends who'd then flip the land for massive profits. My lawyer says there might be a class action lawsuit coming from residents of other communities they victimized. He's already been contacted by 3 other law firms representing different HOAs these guys used to run. As for my farm, things are better than ever. The security gate has worked perfectly. Not a single unauthorized vehicle has tried to use my road since it was installed. I even painted it bright red to match my barn, just because I could. No HOA rules to worry about here. The spike strips? They're mounted on my barn wall now as a conversation piece. Whenever someone asks about them, I get to tell this crazy story about the time some power-hungry HOA board members tried to trap me on my own farm. My wife thinks I should write a book about the whole experience. She says people need to know how seemingly normal HOAs can be taken over by corrupt individuals if residents aren't vigilant. Maybe she's right. There are probably other communities out there dealing with similar issues. The local paper did a big investigative piece about HOA corruption using our case as the centerpiece. They interviewed former residents from other neighborhoods these guys had terrorized, exposing how they'd use HOA rules to bully people into selling their properties. The article led to our state legislature introducing a bill to increase oversight of HOAs and strengthen property rights protections. They're calling it the Farm Road Protection Act. Guess our little dust-up made quite an impression. I've had people from all over the country reach out to share similar stories about HOAs overstepping their bounds. Some asked for advice on fighting back. My response is always the same. Document everything, know your rights, and don't be afraid to stand up to bullies. These days, when I sit on that bench by my gate drinking my morning coffee, I don't just wave at the commuters anymore. I appreciate how this whole crazy situation actually brought our community closer together. Sometimes it takes standing up to the bad guys to help the good folks find their voice. Last week, I hosted a community barbecue at the farm. Almost the entire neighborhood came out. Families playing games in the fields, kids petting the animals, everyone sharing food and stories. Looking around at all the smiling faces, you'd never know there was such bad blood just 6 months ago. The new HOA president made a toast at the barbecue. Here's to good neighbors, strong communities, and farmers who won't back down from bullies with spike strips. I couldn't have said it better myself. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got some actual farming to do. Those fields won't plow themselves, and unlike certain former HOA board members, I believe in honest work for honest pay. P.S. One final bit of karma. Remember that business retreat to Las Vegas they charged to HOA funds? Turns out they used the association's credit card at some, let's say, adult entertainment venues. Those receipts sure made for interesting reading at their criminal trial. Their faces turned about as red as my barn when those charges were read out in court. Sometimes justice takes its sweet time, but it usually arrives eventually, especially when you've got security cameras, a good lawyer, and the patience of a farmer who's been working the same land for decades. Those HOA folks learned the hard way that you can't bully someone who's got right on their side. The next one is a pro-revenge story. This happened a few years ago when I was serving overseas with the U.S. military. The location I was at was in a poorer area. There's a fair number of panhandlers, a lot of petty crime, and just people doing stupid crap. Well, one racket that goes on in this area, and apparently in other areas of the country too, is the local cops incentivize reporting vehicles with out-of-date inspection stickers. Apparently, they give these people access to the inspection database if they think the sticker is fake or stolen, which actually does happen. If you drive a motorcycle, one of the things they tell you when you in-process is to keep the sticker in your wallet and not on the vehicle, or else it'll just get peeled off. Anyway, what these people will do if they find a car with an out-of-date sticker, or if they run the plates and find it's out of date, they will jimmy the door open, steal every single thing out of the car, and leave a note that they've taken it to the police station. The idea is that you show up at the police station to get your stuff and they force you to pay the fine for an overdue sticker and then give you a deadline for an inspection, or else you'll get another fine. Well, I came out to my car one morning and lo and behold, there was a note on my seat saying that all my stuff was at the local police station because my inspection sticker was fake and I had to go get it. No, not only am I late for work, my kid is also going to be late for school because there's no bus, and I have to drive her every morning on my way. Also, my inspection sticker is not out of date, so I have no idea what's going on. Now, here's the thing that was extremely problematic was I had put my passport and my wife's kids in the glove box because I was taking them to the base to get some paperwork done, as well as grab some paperwork for my wife to apply for a new passport because hers was expired. I'm very forgetful, so I put them in the night before and made sure the car was locked. Yeah, dumb mistake. Anyway, I get to the station. asked them what the heck was going on, and then when I have them look at the inspection documents that the guy had taken, which clearly stated the car had been inspected and was current, they apologized and told me that they would give my things back, and I had to wait there for a second. I asked to file a police report for theft, but they looked at me like I had 3 heads and told me nothing was stolen, even though somebody broke into my car and took my things. This is when a light bulb went off in my head, and this might fall into the unethical category. The guy had taken official US passports, which might be a problem, but probably nothing would come of it since they were turned right into the police. However, I asked him where my wife's passport was. They told me that whatever is there is there. I said I needed a police report because I needed to contact the US Embassy about a stolen passport, and the fact that this police station would know exactly who the person was that stole it because they had dropped off my things that morning. I have never seen someone's attitude change as quickly as that cop's attitude changed. He tried to talk me out of filing a police report, but I was pretty insistent, so I went ahead with the police report, and then I did contact the embassy and reported the passport stolen and gave them all the information of the police station, and when I got the police report, I emailed it to them as well. Wound up getting a free passport out of it for my trouble. The embassy told me they were going to handle it, and from what I heard, the person who broke into my car actually got arrested and fined and was looking at additional charges because he stole foreign documents. Really would have liked to have been a fly on the wall when one of the local cops rolled into wherever he was at and told him to come with them. I don't feel bad at all. Hopefully, dude learned his lesson and I did not have any further issues until I PCSD home. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.